Okay, so today is day 49 of Bible in 90 Days, or What's in the Bible. We're reading through the entire Bible just to get an idea of what the Bible talks about, what books are in the Bible, what themes, what topics, or whatever else are covered in the Bible, just as we read it without any, references or commentaries or whatever, just to see, what does it say, just literally, what does it say. So at the moment, we're in the book of Ecclesiastes, which we started yesterday, which was written by Solomon at the end of his life, according to what people think or whatever, but that doesn't really matter. It was written by Solomon, and he seems to be writing it after he has experienced a lot of things, that he's been there and done that, and what his opinion was on how the world actually runs. So these are, his opinions at this time. Then we also get into Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, which is the last book of the writings, because remember we said there's the Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books. Then we have the histories, things like Joshua, First Samuel, Second Samuel, First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles, etc. Then you have the writings, things like Job, like Psalms, like Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Songs of Songs. Then after we finish this tomorrow, we get into the last section of the Old Testament, which is called the prophets. So the prophets, obviously, we'll speak about that when we get there. Let me not get ahead of myself. So Ecclesiastes, today we're going to do chapter 3 all the way to 12, which is the end of Ecclesiastes. Then Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, which is chapter 1 to 8. Then we'll be done with that as well. So Ecclesiastes chapter 3, there is a time for everything, and God created time. He then encourages pursuing happiness, that there will be wickedness and righteousness on this earth, but God will judge in due time. We will all die. Chapter 4, the injustices and sufferings of the world. Community and partnership is better than solitude. Chapter 5, guarding against rash vows. God is watching over everything. The vanity of chasing material goods, and chasing after the world and what it has to offer. It says people leave as they came into the world. So you were born with nothing, and you will die with nothing. So he then encourages again finding enjoyment in work, in relationships, and in the day-to-day things that happen. Chapter 6, he's complaining or mourning over that people can have everything that they want, material goods and servants and all sorts of things, but not be able to live to enjoy it, or even whilst they're living, not to be able to enjoy it. He then talks about contentment is always better. And obviously, at this time, he was saying there was a lack of knowledge about the afterlife, about what happens after people die. Ecclesiastes 7, we then hear some statements that he makes, that like better is this other than, whatever. So better is than that. So there's some statements in there that he's talking about, okay, better is a good name than many riches, or better than not a lot of things, but in righteousness or whatever. God's sovereignty over all things, that God is in control of all things. Good things don't always happen to good people, and bad things don't always happen to bad people either. It talks about God made human beings straightforward, but other things in their lives has cropped up. Chapter 8 talks about obedience to the to the king. Then he talks about something that he noticed, and he quotes it in this verse, says, because sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the human heart is fully set to do evil. He talks about injustices as far as righteous and wicked people, and encouragement again in there to enjoy life. And he also says that nobody really knows what what God is up to. Chapter 8, it says God has his eye on all things, the evil and the good. It says death comes to all people. Again, he encourages enjoying life. It says time and chance happen to all people. And how some people do not get credit for all the good work that they do. Ecclesiastes chapter 10, he talks about foolishness and wisdom, and it kind of goes a bit Proverbs-esque, where he's just talking about general truths or Proverbs line after line. Things like composure is actually a strength, that sin does not pay. Having good leaders is a blessing, and money solves a lot of problems. Chapter 11, he talks about having backup plans. Like, it's always a good thing to have a backup plan, not being afraid to try new things, or to be able just to try things in general. Then he talks about the mystery of how God works, and he quotes this in the verse that says, just as you do not know how the breath comes to the bones in a mother's womb, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. It then talks about do whatever you like, knowing that God will judge all people one day. Chapter 12, which is the last chapter, remembering God in the days of youth before death comes. But verse 13, I think, is the most important verse in the entire book of Ecclesiastes, because this is his conclusion. After all these things that he has said, that he had recognized, and after everything that he had tried in life and the experiences that he has been through, this is Solomon's conclusion to the whole matter. He says, the end of the matter. So this is Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verse 13. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for that is the whole duty of everyone. So basically, whether or not you understand, the injustices, whether you understand what God is doing or not, the injustices that we see, or the harsh truths, things that happen, and how things just happen in general life that we see and we know and we have experienced and other people have gone through. Solomon here is saying, he's been on both sides, of the story, and his encouragement is fear God and keep his commandments, because that is the whole duty of everyone. Then we get into the book of Songs, Songs of Songs, or Song of Solomon, which was also written by Solomon. People say that it was between him and his wife, or maybe his first wife, or whatever he was really in love with. And obviously, they're talking a lot about their relationship. And mostly, to be honest, it's about the attraction that was between them, the friendship that was between them, and how they saw each other and how they were, how they were relating to each other. So I think it's actually a very important book, just like the book of Job or Ecclesiastes. I feel as if most books that you see, there's something in them about that is so good, that is so important, that helps us live, our life. So if anybody tells you that, oh, this is how Christians view sex, or intimacy in marriage, or whatever else, it's important to see what does the book of Song of Solomon say, and how is it portrayed in here. So chapter 1 talks about physical attraction, the physical attraction that was between Solomon and his wife, and how they were pursuing each other. Chapter 2 talks about physical attraction and anticipation, being patient and waiting, for the right time. It talks about how they were daydreaming about each other. It talks about mutual submission. Chapter 3 talks about their search and finding each other and the reunion of the lovers, being patient again and waiting for the right time. It talks about grooming, and being presentable, washing up, and spraying on fragrance or whatever. Chapter 4 talks about appreciation of beauty, how he goes talking about her eyes and her hair and her teeth and her cheeks and her neck and all sorts of other things that were on her body, and how he appreciated her physical characteristics. It talks about an indulgent, kind of love, affirming love for one another. Talks also about purity, before and after marriage, and the sexual encounters, that they had. Chapter 5 talks about enjoying each other in marriage, and all the dramas, of course, that comes with, with that in relationships, involvement of friends, and the relationship actually being used as a testimony. We talks again about physical attraction and friendship that should exist in relationships. Chapter 6 talks about giving each other space, in the relationship, security in relationships, how they were consumed, with each other, paying attention and marveling, at one another. And it also talks about the mystery and excitement, that was in their relationship, and how they, commend this. Chapter 7, physical attraction again. And talks about going away together and just spending some one-on-one time, with each other. And chapter 8, the last chapter, talks about being patient, for love, and waiting, for the right time. The strength, of love, and how the family, can be involved in the raising up of a young girl. Then he finishes off with talking about anticipation and wanting, each other in the relationship. So, a lot of people kind of just say, oh, that's the X-rated book, and it talks about all sorts of things, blah, blah, blah. But I think on a deeper level, Songs of Solomon is actually a very important book for married couples, for people that are waiting, to get married, or, dating relationships or whatever, and how, physical attraction, plays a role, in that. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Tomorrow we get into some really exciting waters, or deep waters, or whatever you want to call them, which is the prophets. And these prophets were the people that were there during the time of the king. So the stuff that will be happening there, you will notice it talks about, okay, this is the prophecy that came in during this time. So it's not as if it's things that happened after the Israelites came back from Babylon after Cyrus, but mostly to do with the things that were happening during the reign, of the king. So yeah, that's where we'll actually spend most of our time before we get into the New Testament. So hopefully that's helpful. I'll see you guys tomorrow as we read the book of Isaiah.